Imagine for a moment being a journalist, driven by this incredible passion to be the eyes and ears for untold stories, exploring cultures most people never get to see. And then suddenly, without any warning, you become the story. Not just any story, but a prisoner in one of the most secretive nations on Earth.
It's a truly chilling scenario, and today you're really in for a gripping deep dive. We're unpacking the harrowing 5-month captivity of American journalist Laura Ling in North Korea back in 2009. But this isn't just about her detainment. It's also about the immense courage of Laura herself and, the relentless fight by her sister Lisa Ling to bring her home. And layered on top of that is this intricate, sometimes really bizarre geopolitical chess game playing out behind the scenes.
Yeah, and our insights for this deep dive, they come from the sisters' powerful memoir, Somewhere Inside. One sister's captivity in North Korea and the other's fight to bring her home. It's a remarkable book. It really is. It offers these intimate firsthand details of their personal ordeal, but it's also woven into this truly complex global drama.
Absolutely. And our aim here is to really distill the key lessons from this incredible experience. We'll explore the humanitarian crisis Laura was actually reporting on, the shocking details of her apprehension and her detainment. Then there's the intricate diplomatic efforts, a lot of it playing out in secret, and ultimately the profound personal toll and thankfully the triumph of their story. You'll hopefully gain a deeper understanding not just of what happened, but maybe why it matters, what it reveals about courage, family, and, the enduring power of human connection, even when facing such daunting odds.
Okay, so let's start at the beginning then. Both Laura and Lisa Ling, they're journalists, right? With this shared drive to tell stories about people and cultures the world often overlooks. They often tackle incredibly difficult topics, like sexual trafficking. So given that background, what specifically drew Laura and her producer Yuna Lee to the Chinese-North Korean border in March 2009?
Well, that really gets to the heart of their journalistic mission. They were there for current TV's investigative documentary program, Vanguard. And their focus was on a truly urgent, yet often kind of overlooked humanitarian issue. North Korean defectors. We're talking about thousands of people, mostly women, who are trafficked into China. They're desperately fleeing, widespread hunger and just bleak conditions back home.
And what's particularly grim about their situation is how China classifies them, isn't it? They're not seen as refugees.
That's precisely it. No, they're classified as illegal immigrants. And this means they have to live in constant hiding, terrified of being repatriated to North Korea, where they face, horrific conditions like the notorious gulags, these brutal political prison camps or torture, even execution. The stakes are just unbelievably high.
It sounds like an incredibly vulnerable existence. Many of these women, the book details, are sold into forced marriages, or they end up in China's booming sex industry. They live without any residency papers, no ID, making them incredibly vulnerable to arrest and being sent back. And it's not just the women, their children, often born to Chinese husbands. They aren't recognized as citizens by the Chinese government, so they're often abandoned, stateless, denied education, health care. It mentions missionaries running these clandestine foster homes, trying to offer what little help they can.
Right. And to really grasp how precarious their situation was, and consequently Laura's eventual situation, you need to understand the geography, specifically the huge contrast in border control here. You have the DMZ, the demilitarized zone, separating North and South Korea. Famously, the most heavily fortified border in the world. It's basically an impenetrable barrier, right? It effectively stops information flowing from high-tech South Korea into the north.
But the China-North Korea border, that's a totally different story, isn't it? What makes it so different, and why is that so significant here?
Exactly. It's incredibly porous. In many areas, it's just a narrow river separating the two countries, sometimes frozen over, like in this case. This allows for, a thriving black market, obviously, but also, crucially, it allows information about China's economic prosperity to seep into the Hermit Kingdom. And that directly challenges North Korea's pervasive propaganda that, the outside world is somehow worse off. It's a crack in their information blockade.
Okay. So before this specific assignment, Lisa admits she wasn't actually as worried about Laura's trip to this border as she had been about Laura's previous assignment, which was in Juarez, Mexico, a city that, at the time, had a higher death rate than Baghdad because of drug violence. That really puts the perceived risk in perspective.
It absolutely does. And there were personal concerns, too, adding another layer. Laura had been dealing with these recurring ulcers for over a year, probably exacerbated by the stress of her demanding work. And she and her husband, Ian, they were planning to start a family. Laura had actually just stopped her ulcer medication so she could try to conceive. So, this added another layer of vulnerability to an already risky profession, a very personal dimension to this high-stakes mission.
So on that critical day, Laura, Ina, and their guide, they traveled to the Tumen River. They needed to film the trafficking route. The river was frozen because it was winter, which made crossing possible. The guide, who apparently had worked with news crews before, he led them across the ice onto North Korean soil. Laura states in the book she was on North Korean soil for less than a minute. And crucially, there were no signs, no fences, nothing indicating the international border.
And then, just like that, North Korean soldiers appeared, guns pointed. The apprehension was shockingly violent, not a warning, just immediate force. Laura and Yuna were physically attacked, kicked in the jaw, shoulder, face. One was struck with a rifle butt. And then they were violently dragged across the frozen river back into North Korea. It was just this instant, brutal shift. 1 minute they're reporting, the next they are the story.
Wow. Laura even describes trying to feign a numb foot, hitting her boot to make it seem immovable, just desperate to buy time on Chinese soil. She screamed for help, thinking she might actually die right there. They were then separated from their guide, who somehow managed to evade capture. From a journalist's perspective, what's the typical protocol in a gray area like that? How does this violent apprehension just immediately change everything?
Well, journalists operating in these border regions, they're often trying to get as close as possible to the story, sometimes pushing boundaries, it's true. But this wasn't a warning or a simple detainment. It was immediate, overwhelming force. In those first hours of detainment, they were taken to a very rudimentary army post, then a second one. Laura describes subtly hiding her microphone, fearing the soldiers might think she was transmitting messages or something. Their belongings were confiscated, and all their money was meticulously counted, which is a small detail, but it kind of underscores the meticulous control the regime exercises over everything.
Then they were blindfolded, handcuffed, crammed into an SUV, and transported to a jail. Laura found herself in this tiny, dim, maybe 5 by 6 foot cell. Heavy metal door, just these postcard-sized slots to see through. She was terrified, immediately thinking of her family, Lisa, her parents, Ayan. What was their initial strategy with the interrogators? How did that develop?
Well, initially they were treated with a surprising degree of relative compassion, actually, even allowed a better meal than you'd expect for prisoners. Laura tried desperately to delete compromising photos of defectors from her digital camera, while Yamuna attempted to destroy the videotapes they'd shot. They quickly cooked up a story, claiming to be students on some kind of independent study program. But the interrogators, Mr. Yi and another official, with a female translator, they were intimidating. They focused relentlessly on Laura's American identity, calling her an enemy, persistently asking about CIA connections. You see that immediate focus on U.S. connections rather than just their journalism. That's really a key insight into North Korea's worldview, their paranoia.
And Laura's injuries from the apprehension itself were severe. A head wound, she lost sensation on the right side of her nose, deep purple welts on her legs. A doctor, who apparently smelled strongly of cigarettes, examined her, cleaned the gash, gave her some ointment, and bizarrely a raw egg for the swelling. It was during a brief shared doctor's visit that Lori and Yuna managed to align their story. They decided they had to tell the truth about being journalists to avoid being viewed as spies. That must have been a really difficult but crucial decision.
Oh, absolutely. They realized being seen as spies was the absolute worst-case scenario. Much more dangerous than admitting to journalism. So once they kind of settled into this horrific routine, Laura spent nearly every single day isolated, often just curled up in her cell or being interrogated for hours on end. She craved contact, any contact. She even faked coughs sometimes, just hoping to hear Yuna's voice from a nearby cell. She received 3 meals a day, typically rice, vegetables, some fish, which, despite being small portions, were likely, more elaborate than what most North Koreans outside the capital received. It just speaks volumes about the scarcity in the country.
And for Laura, letters from family and friends became her absolute lifeline. They provided immense comfort, strength, a vital connection to the outside world she was cut off from. Her husband, Ian, wrote to her twice daily. He'd scan photos, maintain this virtual meeting time, 9 a.m. Pyongyang time, 5 p.m. California time. He never missed one.
And Lisa's letters often tried to comfort Laura, take her back to happier, shared times. Though Lisa admits in the book she sometimes conveyed these unspoken anxieties, even threats that her husband Paul actually had to censor before they were sent. It really highlights the immense challenge of communicating under such tight control, such scrutiny. Laura also found deep solace in poetry, particularly Maya Angelou's Caged Bird, which resonated with her, obviously for her own situation, but also, she felt, for the North Korean people's own struggle for freedom.
It's incredible. So even in captivity, Laura was accidentally influencing North Korean pop culture with Big Daddy quotes. It sounds like there are these incredibly unexpected human interactions that emerge, like with Minjin and Kung-hee, the two female guards who became her sort of accidental language students, with Laura as their 24/7 tutor. It's those small, unexpected human connections that really stand out, aren't they? Especially in such a dehumanizing situation.
They absolutely do. Those moments of humor, like Minjin's confusion over peace out versus piss out, or learning the word shit from watching the movie Big Daddy, it just highlights that universal human desire for connection, doesn't it? Even across these seemingly insurmountable political and cultural divides. Paris, another translator who was apparently quite privileged, she also showed surprising empathy at one point. Paris had a cell phone, an MP3 player, things like that, and she apparently felt bad for Laura's isolation after she herself had visited her own family. These little glimmers of shared humanity, they must have offered Laura profound comfort in that environment.
But those small moments of connection existed within this system of just pervasive information control, right?
Yeah.
What was the North Korean media environment like that she was exposed to, and how did it affect her perception of the outside world?
Oh, it was a completely controlled information bubble, total state control. Laura watched North Korean TV, which was just dominated by military propaganda, films demonizing the U.S., constant news praising Kim Jong-il. Songs were always about love of country or the workers' paradise, never, interestingly, about romantic love. It's fascinating that the Sunday viewing of Tom and Jerry offered this universal dialogue-free escape. Laura actually noted it was apparently popular among Guantanamo Bay prisoners, too. And any international news reports shown on North Korean TV focus heavily on U.S. failures, military campaigns in Iraq and Afghanistan, the declining economy. It was all designed to portray this chaotic world that was supposedly much worse off than North Korea. It was about shaping perception, twisting the narrative entirely to reinforce their own ideology.
And this brings up an important point about Laura's past. Mr. Yi, her main interrogator, really pressed her about a previous visit she'd made to Pyongyang back in 2002. She admitted she had gone, but as a tourist. She was working for Channel 1 News at the time, that news program often broadcast in schools. She posed as a tourist to gain entry because journalists simply weren't admitted. Why was this previous visit so significant to her interrogators? What did they try to make of it?
That previous deception became a really critical point of leverage for them. They seized on it. Mr. Yi accused her of having hostile intentions all along, of trying to bring down the North Korean regime, primarily based on the defector interview tape they'd confiscated. This wasn't really about the facts of what she did. It was about manufacturing a narrative that served their political agenda, pure and simple. On Kim Il-sung's birthday, Mr. Yi even hinted that, he had a history of sending foreign prisoners home, and implied that if Laura just confessed to these hostile intentions, it might somehow pave the way toward forgiveness. It was a classic carrot-and-stick approach, just ruthlessly exploiting her desperation.
So in a truly desperate move, hoping it was the only path to release, Laura confessed. She confessed to having hostile intentions, confessed to trying to topple the North Korean regime. She later fingerprinted and signed this entire 65-page document detailing her crimes. What that really drives home, I think, is that in these environments of absolute control, the truth isn't just distorted, it's actively manufactured to serve the regime. It forces individuals to sacrifice their own integrity just to survive. It's such a stark reminder of the cost of freedom and the immense psychological burden placed on prisoners in those situations.
Indeed. It's a chilling testament to the pressure she was under, a profound insight into the coercive power of a totalitarian state. So with Laura and Yuna Lee's fate just hanging precariously in the balance, early government contact was established back in the U.S. A man named Kurt Tong from the State Department became the family's main contact, and he urged extreme caution, constantly reminding them of North Korea's unpredictable nature. He stressed, "We're not dealing with a normal government here."
Right. And this is where Governor Bill Richardson enters the picture. Lisa reached out to him. And despite some recent political controversy, he'd withdrawn as Obama's Commerce Secretary nominee. He agreed to help, but as a private citizen initially. What crucial advice did he offer? How did that shape the family's strategy moving forward?
Richardson had some really crucial advice based on his past dealings with North Korea. He specifically warned against involving China. He said, North Koreans hate dealing with China. isn't he? And he stated that North Korea wanted to deal directly with the U.S. They felt insulted by the six-party talks, those protracted multilateral negotiations aimed at denuclearizing North Korea. The North Koreans often saw them as this sort of condescending imposition rather than genuine dialogue. So this advice was pivotal. North Korea wanted a direct, high-level engagement with the U.S., and they clearly viewed the sisters as a valuable bargaining chip to get that.
Richardson was later asked by President Obama and Secretary Clinton to officially take on the case, but with a request to maintain a low profile. Meanwhile, Lara, from inside her captivity, she somehow sensed she needed to break the silence. She needed to get media attention back home. She believed this would be seen as movement towards action by the North Koreans who, she noticed, were aware the U.S. government was kind of muzzling the families, keeping things quiet. So she pushed hard for a phone call, arguing it was the only way to effectively convey messages without them being twisted or misconstrued, like in the censored letters. That took incredible courage, given her position.
It really, really did, and it eventually led to that first phone call home. Laura was allowed to call Lisa Ling and her parents from the Yanggakdo Hotel in Pyongyang. She struggled, you could hear it, to hold back tears, assuring them she was okay. But she also subtly communicated this urgent need for direct dialogue between the U.S. and North Korea. She specifically told Lisa to break the silence.
And Lisa immediately understood the code. She convened the family, and they decided, unanimously, to go public. This was despite former Vice President Al Gore's personal objection. He was involved because Laura worked for Current TV, which he co-founded. He apparently didn't think publicizing it was the right move. That's a significant gamble, going against such high-level advice.
It absolutely was. But they felt desperate, They felt time was running out. And the situation escalated even further when a trial date was suddenly set for June 4th, which was apparently an unprecedented move for an American detainee at that time. The trial itself took place not in a traditional courtroom, but in what Laura described as a performance space setup, almost theatrical. The prosecutor viciously attacked Laura's journalism, comparing her unfavorably to some respected journalist named Agnes Smedley and framing her actions as just an extension of U.S. imperialism.
Laura felt she had no choice but to condemn Pastor Chun, the activist helping defectors and the whole defector network, just to try and prove remorse. The defense attorney, assigned by the state, was completely ineffective, asking irrelevant questions, simply stating Laura was sorry. The prosecutor asked for 15 years. The judge delivered a sentence of 12 years of hard labor, stating flatly, no forgiveness and no appeal. Laura was absolutely petrified. How did she and her family back home even cope with such a devastating blow?
It was just a crushing blow. Devastating. But Laura secretly hoped her ongoing medical detention, she was having ulcer flare-ups requiring an endoscopy, would buy them more time for diplomatic efforts. And indeed, the medical director at the hospital where she was being treated actually refuted the prosecutor's assessment, saying Laura was not yet medically fit for prison. That bought them precious time. So post-trial, the envoy negotiations began in earnest. Laura actually suggested Al Gore as a possible envoy. Mr. Yi initially seemed to think it was a good idea, but later rejected it, saying Gore was just a private citizen. It really highlights the constantly shifting, unpredictable nature of North Korean demands, a huge challenge for any diplomatic effort.
And then North Korean officials started hinting that only President Obama or past presidents like Carter or Clinton were acceptable envoys. High level. Laura eventually settled on Carter or Clinton as the most likely possibilities to suggest. Were there any other sort of unusual diplomatic threads or back-channel offers during this period? Sounds like a real shadow play.
Oh, absolutely. It got stranger. Lisa was even approached, apparently through some intermediary, with an offer of free pancreatic cancer treatment for Kim Jong-il in exchange for the girl's release. However, the State Department advised against pursuing it. Their reasoning was it would force North Korea to publicly admit their leader was ill, which could potentially undermine his position internally. Rumors were also swirling constantly about Kim Jong-il's health and potential power struggles within the regime, which just added another layer of complexity and uncertainty to an already opaque situation.
Wow. And simultaneously, public and political pressure was really mounting back home. A man named Brendan Creamer created a Detained North Korea, Laura Ling and Unili Facebook page. It gathered thousands of supporters, organized vigils across the U.S., even worldwide. Another person, Richard Horgan, created a Liberate Laura blog and Twitter feed, attracting thousands more followers. It really shows the power of grassroots movements and social media, even back in 2009.
It really does. The family also orchestrated a live CNN broadcast with Anderson Cooper from one of the vigils. They were hoping Kim Jong-il, who was known to watch CNN, would see their very personal, non-political plea for leniency. Then, Secretary of State Hillary Clinton issued a formal public apology for Laura and Yuna's transgression, as they termed it, and officially requested amnesty. A North Korean official actually told Laura later that Secretary Clinton's apology was received positively, and it's a big, but they still wanted Bill Clinton as the envoy. The diplomatic pressure was clearly building, but North Korea just kept holding out for the biggest possible prize.
Okay, the narrative takes another really dramatic turn with that final call. Laura got one more phone call home, and this time she specifically told Lisa and Ian that it had to be Bill Clinton. No ambiguity. And she said she was mentally preparing herself for prison if it didn't happen. Yuna, interestingly, did not mention Clinton in her own call around the same time. What was the immediate reaction to that specific demand from Laura's family and from the U.S. government?
Well, Lisa apparently went ballistic, understandably frustrated by these constantly shifting demands. But she also understood the absolute gravity of the situation. This was likely the final ask. So after some really intense internal negotiations and definite concerns from the Obama White House about giving North Korea too big a prize by sending a former president, Bill Clinton agreed to undertake the secret mission. It was a huge, calculated risk, but it seemed like the only path forward at that point.
Steve Bing, the late philanthropist, donated his private plane for the trip to Pyongyang. Dow Chemical apparently provided another plane for support. The mission was approved, top secret, with liftoff set for August 4th. But then somehow it was leaked to the South Korean press, making headlines worldwide just before he left. The secrecy, so carefully maintained, was suddenly broken.
Yeah, despite the leak, the mission proceeded. Laura, back in Pyongyang, was told an important envoy would be arriving and she might go home soon. Just maybe. Clinton arrived with a deliberately stoic expression. He had apparently practiced not appearing too friendly or affable, and significantly, North Korea's chief nuclear negotiator, Kim Ki-gwan, was the one who met him at the airport. This immediately signaled North Korea's intent to try and link the sisters' release to nuclear discussions, despite the U.S. explicitly wanting to keep the humanitarian mission separate from the nuclear issue. It really highlights a key diplomatic principle, right? In situations with regimes like North Korea, even a humanitarian crisis becomes a strategic chess game. Leverage is everything, and the prize of a high-level envoy can sometimes be the only currency that works.
Laura's first tangible sign that her country was really there for her was seeing a lone U.S. Secret Service agent standing in the hotel lobby. She said it gave her goosebumps, just a truly powerful moment of relief, finally seeing a piece of home. Clinton then briefly met with Laura and Yuna, confirming that an apology had been made on their behalf and expressing his confidence that they would be leaving with him the next morning.
And the pardon came swiftly after that meeting. A high-ranking North Korean general formally announced that Kim Jong-il had granted them a special pardon. Laura was then forced, even then, to write a thank-you letter to Kim Jong-il, a final act of forced compliance even as freedom was literally within reach. At the airport for departure, the North Koreans meticulously managed the optics. They ensured Clinton was already on the plane before allowing Laura and Yuna to approach it. They were determined to prevent any images of the women warmly greeting Clinton on North Korean soil. Just total control of the narrative right to the very end. One of Clinton's aides, Doug Band, actually stayed behind on the tarmac to make absolutely sure the women boarded safely before he got on himself.
Laura describes just this immense wave of relief and freedom washing over her as she finally boarded that plane. The reunion back in Burbank, California was incredibly emotional, as you can imagine. Clinton's plane landed, and Laura's family and Yuna's family, including Yuna's young daughter, Hannah, were all there waiting on the tarmac. Laura was just overwhelmed. She threw her arms up in triumph, embracing Ian, her mother, her father. Lisa noted in the book that her parents looked older, worn down by the stress, but were absolutely overjoyed.
Laura found it difficult to even speak at first, after months of forced silence and limited interaction, but she managed to thank Al Gore for his tireless efforts behind the scenes. President Obama even called Bill Clinton on the plane during the flight, back apparently their first conversation in quite a while, which is a clear sign of the mission's national significance and, ultimately, its success.
In the aftermath, though, Laura struggled to adjust back to freedom. It took weeks for her to speak freely again. She couldn't bring herself to watch any of the media appearances she'd made from captivity because of the intense pain she knew her family had endured watching them. Her physical health improved, thankfully. A doctor confirmed no permanent damage from the head injuries she sustained during the capture. And Laura apparently broke down in tears when she finally spoke to Brendan Creamer, the man who started the Facebook page, thanking him for organizing all that widespread public support. It sounds like a slow but really essential journey back to some kind of normalcy.
Indeed, a very slow process. And then, months later, a truly miraculous turn of events. Laura discovered she was pregnant. After everything, she was pregnant. She planned to name her baby girl Lai, which was a beautiful tribute to her sister Lisa for her relentless fight. This was just such a profound moment of triumph and hope, especially after fearing she might never have children following that brutal 12-year sentence. It's a really beautiful testament to hope and resilience, isn't it?
It really is. But Lisa emphasizes, and it's an important point, that the story isn't really over just because Laura and Yuna came home. Thousands of North Korean defectors still live in this tragic uncertainty in China, constantly fearing repatriation and potential death. She highlights the critical importance of journalists continuing to bring these difficult stories to light, hoping to affect change.
Yeah, she specifically recommends supporting organizations that are still working on these issues. Groups like Liberty in North Korea, often called LINC, the Committee to Protect Journalists, CPJ, and Reporters Without Borders, RSF, they continue to work on these vital human rights issues every day. It's a crucial reminder that even after Laura's personal story reached its resolution, the underlying crisis continues for so many others.
We've navigated a truly extraordinary deep dive today, from the courageous reporting that led to Laura Ling's captivity, through that intricate and often incredibly frustrating diplomatic dance, all the way to the emotional reunion that really captivated the world back then.
Yeah, this story powerfully illustrates how personal hardship can intersect so dramatically with global politics. It reveals the remarkable resilience of the human spirit and the unwavering bonds of family, even when facing down what seems like an impenetrable enemy state.
And, Laura Ling found moments of common ground, even laughter, with her North Korean guards. A small act of empathy from one translator completely changed her perspective in that moment. So maybe the final thought for you, the listener, is this. In a world still so marked by division and distrust, what opportunities for unexpected connection might arise if we just tried to look beyond the national labels, beyond the politics, and recognize the shared humanity in each other? Even across seemingly impenetrable borders,